The telepathic alien's final scream of terror died in the vacuum of space, as the decompression sucked Odin's body through a pinprick hole in the hull, where a human girl had stabbed precisely into the starship's bulkhead. Joshua Evans grunted in exhaustion as he finished welding the puncture, the human merc's augmented spacesuit auto-adjusting its internal pressure. He glanced around the bridge. No more stowaways. He could finally get paid. The anonymous client had transferred an 7-figure credit sum into escrow, pending delivery of the Iridian, and Joshua never failed to collect. Captain Jax, one of his few friends, had dropped him off in a cloaked shuttle just outside the detection perimeter of Stormgate Supermax, a pitch-black, uncharted prison complex constructed around the skeleton of a shattered moon. The desolate megastructure was suspended in orbit of a bloated red giant star, in the final stages of collapse. A perfect black site. A ping on Joshua's wrist computer indicated an incoming text transmission relayed through the shuttle's QEC comms. Joshua smirked as he flexed his gauntlets, replying through his neural link. As the stealth shuttle detached and disappeared into the void, Joshua felt the twisted hulk of the alien ship lurch and moan. Stormgate's shift rotation would discover the corpse-strewn abattoir in a matter of minutes. He had to get off this tomb before the alarms triggered a system-wide lockdown. The ex-soldier queued up his exit route, charted by bribing a disgruntled guard with a gambling problem, to hand over an activation key and duty roster, corrupt staff, faulty sensors, and degraded firewalls, all fatal security holes for the right infiltrator. But Joshua couldn't shake a sickening doubt brewing in his mind. Something felt wrong. Odin was the last Iridian in the known universe, an ancient being of immense psychic power, shackled by a nullifier crown hammered to his skull, an unrivaled weapon, or an ultimate liability. Whispers of a legendary war echoed through Joshua's brain, waged between humanity's ancestors and the Iridian dominion. When the celestial bloodshed finally ended, only one alien child survived, Odin. But that was centuries ago. Why capture the creature now? Surely any strategic intel he possessed was long obsolete. No, whoever hired Joshua needed the Iridian for something else. Someone else. They needed this alien's secret, terrible power for some dark purpose, and if they had it, what did that mean for humanity's future? No time for existential musings. Get off this hellish barge, secure the package, survive simple mission parameters, deal with the fallout later. Joshua rechecked his arsenal, twin plasma SMGs, 24 seeker grenades, a few nasty surprises, a full combat loadout, perfect for shooting his way out of an unassailable galactic gulag. Piece of cake. An automated alert registered on Joshua's HUD as his suit's external sensors picked up a fusillade of incoming hostiles. The deck rattled as the first salvo of shells slammed into the hull. Inhuman screeches of rage and blaring klaxons filled the air. Guess the warden finally noticed his prize prisoner took a little spacewalk. No more stealth. Time to get loud. Joshua's stealth suit shimmered as he slipped through the shadows, the prison's dim lights flickering across the adaptive camouflage. Guards dropped silently, their weapons clattering to the floor as he dispatched them with ruthless efficiency. Security cameras went dark, their feeds looping innocuous footage as Joshua spliced into the system. Deeper into the bowels of the station he crept, until he reached a heavily fortified blast door. Research lab, authorized personnel only, read the stark warning emblazoned across its surface. Joshua's suit computer interfaced with the lock, cycling through encryption keys until the door hissed open. Inside, rows of containment cells lined the walls, each housing an emaciated Iridian prisoner. Many were hooked up to grotesque machines, their eyes vacant, minds shattered. Joshua's stomach turned as he accessed the lab's central computer, the horrific truth unfolding before his eyes. Project Siren, an unsanctioned black op aiming to weaponize the Iridian's telepathic abilities for military gain. Invasive brain implants, psychoactive drugs, brutal conditioning, all in the name of creating the perfect psychic super-soldier. And at the heart of it all, Odin, the last scion of the Iridian royal bloodline, bearer of their most potent gifts. Joshua's target was no mere prisoner, but the key to unlocking the project's true potential. A flashing alert on the computer caught Joshua's eye. Multiple factions had infiltrated the station, each vying for control of Odin. Rogue special forces units, corporate strike teams, ruthless bounty hunters, all converging on the lab, ready to kill anyone in their way. Alarms blared as Joshua's intrusion was detected, heavy boots echoing through the halls. He readied his weapons and steeled himself for the fight to come. Failure was not an option. Odin's cell was at the far end of the lab, guarded by a phalanx of elite troopers. Joshua moved like a whirlwind, plasma rounds and seeker grenades tearing through their armor as he danced between their shots. Consoles exploded and containment cells ruptured, the screams of the dying mixing with the wail of sirens. Finally, he stood before Odin's prison, the battered door sliding open to reveal the alien's prone form. But something was wrong. Odin sat motionless, eyes milky and unfocused, seemingly oblivious to the chaos around him. Joshua rushed to the Iridian's side, hands flying over the restraints and neural jacks that held him in thrall. But Odin remained unresponsive, lost in some deep catatonic fugue. Precious seconds ticked by as Joshua tried to rouse the alien, enemies drawing ever closer. He had to break Odin out of this trance, or all would be lost. Joshua's mind raced as he searched for a way to break through to the catatonic Iridian. Standard revival protocols had failed, and time was running out. Suddenly, he remembered the experimental neural interface he'd swiped from a black market tech dealer a few jobs back. The device was designed for deep mind-to-mind communication, but the risks were high. One wrong move and he could fry both their brains. Instantly, Joshua's mind was flooded with a tidal wave of memories and emotions. He saw the Iridian homeworld in flames, cities crumbling under the onslaught of an unknown enemy. He felt Odin's despair as he watched his people die, the last of his kind. Then came the experiments, the endless torture and manipulation, the slow erosion of sanity. Joshua realized that Odin's telepathic abilities were far beyond what he'd imagined. The alien had been using them as a shield, a last defense against the unrelenting agony. The words echoed through the psychic link, Odin's mental voice weak but clear. With a shuddering gasp, Odin's eyes snapped open, blazing with newfound determination. Joshua disconnected the neural link, helping the alien to his feet. "I will be your vessel," Odin said aloud, his voice cracked from disuse. "Together, we will have vengeance." They moved swiftly through the crumbling station, Odin's psychic powers confounding the guards, making them see double, trip over thin air. Joshua dispatched the disoriented foes with cold efficiency, leaving a trail of bodies in their wake. Alarms shrieked as they neared the hangar bay, warning of imminent destabilization. The Shadowhawks sat waiting, their ticket off this doomed hunk of metal. But between them and freedom stood a wall of heavily armed troops, led by a towering cyborg bristling with weapons. "Zax!" Joshua spat, recognizing the infamous mercenary. "Figures our corp would send their top dog." "Surrender the package, little man," Zax growled, his voice a grating electronic buzz. "I'd hate to splatter you across the bulkhead." The cyborg's arm-mounted cannon whirred to life, targeting laser painting a glowing dot on Joshua's chest. Joshua just smiled and thumbed the activation stud on his suit's wrist launcher. A salvo of micro-rockets streaked towards Zax's team, exploding into clouds of razor-sharp shrapnel. At the same time, Odin unleashed a wave of psychic force, the invisible blast slamming into the mercs like a runaway grav train. Weapons melted, bones shattered, blood sprayed in crimson arcs. Even Zax staggered under the assault, his mechanical limbs sparking and twitching. Seizing the opening, Joshua charged forward, plasma SMGs blazing. He vaulted over a flaming crate and unloaded point-blank into Zax's chest, the superheated rounds tearing through alloy and flesh. The cyborg roared in pain and lashed out with a massive fist, But Joshua was already moving, ducking under the blow and firing again. A deafening boom shook the hangar as Zax's cannon exploded, the feedback tearing the mercenary apart in a spray of shrapnel and gore. Joshua rolled clear of the blast, snatching up a fallen rifle and laying down covering fire as Odin sprinted for the Shadowhawk's open hatch. More mercs poured into the hangar, a tide of guns and armor. Odin reached the ship and extended a hand, eyes flaring with eldritch light. The mercs' weapons crumpled like tin foil, their bones snapping like kindling. They dropped in twisted heaps, mewling in agony. But the psychic maelstrom was too much. Odin screamed as blood poured from his eyes and nose, the backlash shredding his mind. Consoles exploded, the hangar lights flickering madly. The entire station groaned like a dying beast, the deck buckling beneath Joshua's feet. He lunged for the Shadowhawk, tackling Odin through the hatch an instant before a geyser of plasma roared up from the ruptured deck. Joshua slammed the hatch controls and threw himself into the pilot's seat, hands flying over the console. The ship's engines roared to life, maneuvering thrusters firing to tear them free of the umbilical. Odin slumped in the co-pilot's chair, blood still trickling from his ruined eyes. "Go," he croaked, his voice a thready whisper in Joshua's mind. "Leave this place to its fate." Joshua gunned the thrusters, and the Shadowhawk leapt forward, shedding docking clamps and mooring lines. The hangar collapsed behind them, a maelstrom of twisting metal and blossoming flame. Proximity alarms howled as the prison station crumpled in on itself, the power core finally succumbing to the cascade of failures. The shockwave caught the Shadowhawk like a hammer blow, sending them tumbling end over end. Joshua fought with the controls, thrusters straining to stabilize their spin. The station exploded in a blinding flash, a miniature sun blooming in the void. Molten debris pelted the ship's hull, alarms shrieking in protest. But they were clear, racing away from the expanding cloud of destruction. Joshua sagged back in his chair, adrenaline still singing in his veins. Beside him, Odin stirred, his ruined eyes slowly regenerating, the alien's natural healing factor kicking in. They had escaped. Odin was safe for now. But Joshua couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The secrets locked in the Iridian's mind, the factions desperate to exploit his power. There would be a reckoning, and Joshua would be there to face it, guns drawn and head held high. It's what he did best, after all. The Shadowhawk shuddered as a chunk of twisted metal bounced off the shields, the debris field growing thicker by the second. Joshua wrestled with the controls, teeth gritted as he wove through the spinning wreckage. Odin sat slumped in the co-pilot's chair, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The escape had taken its toll both physically and mentally, but there was no time to rest. A proximity alarm shrieked, sensors detecting an incoming ship. Joshua's eyes widened as he saw the massive warship drop out of hyperspace, its hull emblazoned with the insignia of the Galactic Federation. Joshua's lip curled. Like hell he would. He'd dealt with the Federation before, seen the depths of their hypocrisy and corruption, and now they wanted Odin, not on his watch. He opened a channel, his voice dripping with false deference. "Admiral Vax, this is Captain Joshua Evans of the Shadowhawk. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. We're just a simple cargo hauler, caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. If you'll let us go on our way, we'll be out of your hair in no time." The Admiral's response was swift and uncompromising. "Cut the crap, Evans. We know you have the Iridian. Hand him over peacefully, or we'll take him by force." Joshua's hands tightened on the controls, his mind racing. They were outgunned and outnumbered, the Titan's weapons already locking on, but he couldn't let them take Odin, not after everything they'd been through. He turned to the Iridian, his voice low and urgent. "Odin, I need you to trust me. Can you tap into their systems, disrupt their targeting, give us a chance to escape?" Odin's eyes met his, a flicker of understanding passing between them. The alien nodded, his face set with determination. Joshua turned back to the comm, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You know, Admiral, I find it interesting that you're so eager to get your hands on my friend here. One might almost think you had something to do with those experiments back on the prison station. You know, the ones where you tortured and manipulated innocent Iridians, all in the name of weaponizing their powers for your own gain. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Vax's voice roared back, all pretense of civility gone. "How dare you! I'll see you thrown in the darkest hole I can find, you insolent!" But his words were cut off as Odin's mental blast slammed into the Titan, the Iridian's eyes blazing with fury. Consoles sparked and screens flickered, the warship's systems reeling under the psychic assault. Joshua seized the opening, firing the thrusters and sending the Shadowhawk hurtling away from the stricken vessel. Vax's curses followed them, promising retribution, but they were already gone, vanishing into the swirling vortex of hyperspace. Joshua sagged back in his chair, adrenaline still pumping through his veins. He looked over at Odin, saw the same realization in the alien's eyes. They were fugitives now, hunted by the very government that was supposed to protect them. But they weren't alone. Joshua thought of his contacts, the network of spies and informants he'd cultivated over the years. Ghost, the hacker who could infiltrate any system. Zeph, the freedom fighter with a heart of fire. They would help, he knew. Help him strike back at the Federation, expose the truth of their crimes. Odin squeezed his hand in return, a gesture of trust, of friendship forged in the crucible of battle. Together they would face the storm, and woe to any who stood in their way. Joshua sprinted through the corridors of Omnidyne's research facility, Odin's limp form slung over his shoulders. Plasma bolts scorched the walls as the remaining soldiers pursued them, their shouts echoing through the halls. "Hang on, buddy," Joshua muttered, ducking into a side passage. "I'm getting you out of here." He reached the Shadowhawk's airlock, slamming his fist against the control panel. The door hissed open and he stumbled inside, laying Odin gently on the medical bay's exam table. The ship's AI came to life, scanning Odin's vital signs. "Subject has sustained severe internal injuries and blood loss," it reported in a cool, clinical tone. "Immediate medical attention required." Joshua worked feverishly, applying pressure bandages and administering coagulants. But it wasn't enough. Odin needed more than basic first aid. He needed a miracle. Joshua's mind raced, sifting through his contacts. And then it hit him. Zara Rin, the renegade doctor. She was brilliant, unorthodox, and not afraid to get her hands dirty. If anyone could save Odin, it was her. He punched in her comm code, his heart pounding. The line crackled and then her face appeared, sharp and angular. Her eyes narrowed. "A Iridian. You certainly know how to pick your friends. Bring him to my clinic on Noveria Station." "But Joshua, this isn't a charity. You want my help. You're going to have to do something for me in return." Joshua gritted his teeth. "Name it." "There's a new neuroregenerator that's just hit the market. State-of-the-art, cutting edge. It's exactly what I need to treat your friend, but it's locked up tight in the medical center on Noveria. High security, heavily guarded. I need you to get it for me." Zara nodded curtly. "I'll do my best, but hurry, Joshua, time's not on your side." The comm line went dead, and Joshua slumped back in his chair, his mind reeling. He plotted a course for Noveria Station, his jaw clenched with determination. The Shadowhawk docked at Noveria Station, the airlock hissing open. Joshua stepped out, a stolen doctor's ID badge clipped to his jacket. Beside him, Zara adjusted her own disguise, her face obscured by a surgical mask. They moved through the station's gleaming corridors, blending in with the flow of doctors and patients. Joshua's heart hammered in his chest as they approached the medical center, its doors guarded by a pair of armed security bots. Zara flashed her stolen ID at the scanner, and the doors slid open. They were in. The neuroregenerator was housed in a secure lab on the center's top floor. Joshua and Zara moved quickly, their footsteps muffled on the sterile tile. They reached the lab, the door's lock no match for Zara's hacking skills. Inside, the regenerator sat in a reinforced case, its sleek lines glinting under the harsh lights. Joshua reached for it, his fingers brushing the cool metal. And then all hell broke loose. Alarms shrieked and the lab doors burst open, armed guards pouring in. Joshua cursed, realizing their intrusion had been detected. He drew his plasma pistol, the weapon humming to life. "Get the device," he shouted to Zara, firing at the guards. "I'll cover you." Zara lunged for the case, snatching it up as plasma bolts filled the air. Joshua laid down a suppressing fire, the guards falling back under the onslaught. They ran, sprinting through the medical center's halls as reinforcements closed in. Joshua's lungs burned and his legs ached, but he pushed on, Zara close behind. They burst into the main lobby, dozens of startled patients and doctors scattering. The guards were right behind them, weapons drawn. Joshua and Zara were trapped, outnumbered and outgunned. Joshua raised his pistol, ready to go down fighting. And then the guards stumbled, clutching their heads and crying out in pain. Joshua stared in disbelief as they crumpled to the ground, their weapons clattering to the floor. Odin's mental voice echoed through Joshua's mind, strained but triumphant. As the station fell away behind them, Joshua slumped against the wall, his heart racing. They had done it, they had the regenerator. Back on the Shadowhawk, Zara worked quickly, hooking Odin up to the neuro-regenerator. The device hummed and pulsed, its lights flickering over the Iridian's pallid skin. Hours passed, the tension in the medbay thick enough to cut with a knife. Joshua paced, his fists clenched, his mind whirling with worst-case scenarios. And then, finally, Odin stirred. His eyes fluttered open, clear and focused. Joshua rushed to his side, relief flooding through him. "You had me worried there, buddy," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thought I might have to finish this mission solo." Odin managed a weak smile. "Not a chance," he said. "We started this together, we'll finish it together." He struggled to sit up, wincing at the effort. Joshua helped him, concern etched on his face. Joshua leaned in, his heart pounding. "What truth?" "This conspiracy, these experiments, they go beyond Omnidyne, beyond the corporations and crime syndicates. Joshua, the Galactic Federation itself is involved. The rot goes all the way to the top." Joshua reeled back, his mind spinning. The Federation, the supposed guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy, the ones sworn to protect the innocent and uphold the law. He clenched his fists, a cold rage settling in his gut. They had to expose this corruption, bring the truth to light, no matter the danger, no matter the odds. For the sake of every species, every world, the Federation had to be stopped. Joshua met Odin's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. They were in this together until the end. And woe to any who stood in their way. Joshua leaned back in his chair, the weight of Odin's revelation heavy on his shoulders. The Galactic Federation, the very institution sworn to protect and serve the galaxy's citizens, was rotten to the core. Involved in the horrific experiments on the Iridians and other species, all in the name of creating psychic super-soldiers. It was a betrayal of everything Joshua had ever fought for, everything he believed in. But he wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not while he still drew breath. He turned to Odin and Zara, his eyes hard with determination. "We have to expose this conspiracy," he said, his voice low and intense. "We have to bring those responsible to justice, no matter the cost." Odin nodded, his own expression grim. "I agree, but it won't be easy. The Federation's reach is vast, and they'll stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried." Joshua's mind raced, a plan taking shape. "We need to infiltrate that secret meeting," he said. "Get evidence of their involvement, their collusion with Omnidyne and the others, something we can take to the media, to the people." Zara leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "But how do we get in? That kind of meeting will be heavily guarded, invitation only." A slow smile spread across Joshua's face. "We steal the access codes," he said. "Ghost and Zeph can help us. With their skills and inside knowledge, we might just have a chance." They got to work, Ghost and Zeph feeding them intel on the Federation outpost where the codes were stored. Security schematics, guard rotations, weak points in the defenses. Joshua and Odin pored over the data, memorizing every detail, every potential obstacle. When the time came, they were ready. Disguised as Federation soldiers, They slipped into the outpost, blending in with the rank and file. Joshua's heart pounded as they made their way deeper into the facility, past layers of security checkpoints and armed patrols. Finally, they reached the central computer core. Ghost's voice crackled over their encrypted comms, guiding them through the complex network of firewalls and encryption algorithms. Odin stood guard, his telepathic senses stretched to the limit, ready to warn of any approaching danger. Joshua's fingers flew over the keyboard, Ghost's instructions guiding him through the labyrinthine data structure. Just a little further, just a few more levels. Suddenly Odin stiffened, his eyes going wide. "Joshua," he hissed, his voice tight with tension. "We have company." Joshua's head snapped up, his hand dropping to his weapon. He saw them then, a team of black-clad figures moving through the shadows with inhuman grace and speed. Assassins, their minds shielded from Odin's psychic probes, their bodies augmented with cutting-edge genetic enhancements. They had been bred for one purpose and one purpose only: to hunt down and eliminate rogue psychics like Odin. Joshua cursed, his finger tightening on the trigger. He fired, the muzzle flash strobing in the dimness, but the assassins were too fast, too agile. They dodged and weaved, closing in with terrifying speed. Odin lashed out with his mind, trying to penetrate their mental defenses, but it was like trying to grasp smoke. The assassins pressed their attack, their movements a blur, their strikes precise and deadly. Joshua fought with everything he had, his gun barking, his fists and feet lashing out in a desperate dance of survival. But it wasn't enough. The assassins were too strong, too fast, too many. Beside him, Odin staggered, blood seeping from a dozen wounds. His face was pale, his breath coming in ragged gasps. But his eyes blazed with a fierce, unearthly light. With a roar of defiance, Odin unleashed the full might of his psychic power. A shockwave of pure mental energy exploded outward, slamming into the assassins like a runaway freight train. They crumpled, their minds shattered, their bodies broken. But the effort had drained Odin to the brink of collapse. He sagged against Joshua, his eyes fluttering, his skin clammy with sweat. Joshua gritted his teeth, hoisting Odin over his shoulder. He snatched the access codes from the computer, then turned and ran, his lungs burning, his muscles screaming with fatigue. Somehow, through sheer grit and determination, they made it back to the Shadowhawk. Joshua laid Odin down in the medbay, his hands shaking as he tended to his friend's wounds. They had the codes, they had a way into the meeting. But the price had been high, and Joshua knew it would only get higher. As he sat there watching over Odin's unconscious form, Joshua felt a cold, hard knot of resolve settle in his gut. No matter what it took, no matter what he had to sacrifice, he would see this through to the end. For Odin, for the Iridians, for every innocent soul the Federation had trampled in their ruthless pursuit of power. He would make them pay, even if it was the last thing he ever did. Joshua straightened his tie, the expensive suit feeling like a second skin as he strode into the opulent conference room. The air hummed with tension, the gathered power brokers and shadowy figures eyeing each other with calculated suspicion. He spotted Odin across the room, the Iridian's telepathic presence, a faint whisper in his mind. The alien gave a nearly imperceptible nod, his disguise as a Federation diplomat holding up under scrutiny. "Of course, the Iridian project is proceeding quite well," a severe woman in an Omnidyne uniform said, sipping her drink. "Dr. Kordax's latest breakthroughs have been most promising." The woman's lips thinned. "That was an unfortunate setback, but I assure you the good doctor has more than made up for it since." Across the room, Odin stiffened, his mental voice urgent. Joshua kept his expression neutral, laughing at some inane joke. Joshua's blood ran cold. Zara stepped out from the shadows, flanked by a squad of heavily armed soldiers. The gathered conspirators muttered in confusion and alarm, some reaching for weapons of their own. "You really thought you could infiltrate this meeting without me knowing?" Zara sneered, her once kind face twisted with contempt. "I've been on to you from the start, Joshua, you and your alien pet." Joshua's mind raced, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. Zara's miraculous medical skills, her eagerness to join their cause, her conveniently timed intelligence. "You're a plant," he said, his voice hollow. "A clone grown in some Federation lab to be their perfect little mole." Zara clapped her hands in mock applause. "Bravo, Joshua, you figured it out. And just in time to die." She raised a hand and the soldiers opened fire, energy bolts stitching the air. The room erupted into chaos, screams and shattering glass mixing with the sizzle of plasma. Joshua dove for cover, his own pistol leaping into his hand. He fired back, dropping 2 soldiers with clean headshots. Beside him, Odin rose, eyes blazing with psychic light. The Iridian lashed out, his mental might crushing weapons and shattering bones. Soldiers crumpled like rag dolls, their minds broken, their bodies soon to follow. But there were too many, their weapons and armor designed to resist psychic assault. For every foe Odin struck down, 2 more took their place, a relentless tide of death and metal. Joshua fought like a man possessed, his gun an extension of his will. He danced through the bullets, dealing death with every squeeze of the trigger, but it wasn't enough. A searing pain lanced through his shoulder, a lucky shot finding its mark. Joshua stumbled, his pistol clattering to the ground. Zara loomed over him, her face a mask of triumphant cruelty. "Goodbye, Joshua," she said, her gun leveled at his head. "I'll be sure to give your regards to—" A psychic lance, bright and terrible, pierced her skull. Zara dropped like a puppet with its strings cut, her clone mind no match for Odin's unleashed fury. The Iridian stood amid a circle of fallen foes, his body wreathed in eldritch energy. With a wordless cry he let loose a final cataclysmic blast, a tidal wave of pure psychic force. Soldiers, conspirators, the very walls themselves, all were swept away, reduced to ash and echoes. Only Joshua remained untouched, protected by the unbreakable bond of their friendship. But the effort had been too much. As the dust settled, Odin collapsed, his life force guttering like a dying star. Joshua crawled to his side, heedless of his own wounds. "Stay with me, buddy," he said, cradling the Iridian's head. "We're almost there. We're going to make it." Odin's eyes fluttered, a faint smile playing across his bloodied lips. "We did it, Joshua," he whispered, each word an agony. "We won." Then his eyes slid shut, and he went limp in Joshua's arms, his chest still, his psychic presence fading to a ghostly whisper. Joshua wept then, great heaving sobs that shook his battered frame. He had lost so much, sacrificed so much, and now, with victory in his grasp, he had lost the one thing he couldn't bear to lose. But even as despair threatened to claim him, a spark of determination ignited in his heart. He would not let Odin's sacrifice be in vain. He would not let the Federation's evil go unpunished. He would fight on for his friend, for the galaxy, for the dream of a future free from tyranny and fear. No matter the cost. Joshua gritted his teeth as he dragged Odin's limp body through the shattered remnants of the secret meeting room. Plasma bolts sizzled past, the acrid stench of ozone filling his nostrils. He returned fire with his free hand, his aim true despite the chaos. 2 Federation soldiers crumpled, smoke rising from their seared armor. "Come on, buddy," Joshua grunted, hoisting Odin over his shoulder. "We're getting out of here." He sprinted down the corridor, his augmented legs pumping like pistons. Alarms blared, red lights strobing across the walls. Ahead, a squad of troopers burst from a side passage, weapons raised. Joshua didn't break stride. His gun barked once, twice, 3 times. The soldiers fell, their screams lost in the cacophony of battle. The hangar bay loomed before him, the Shadowhawk a welcome sight amid the carnage. Joshua raced up the ramp, slamming his fist against the hatch controls. As the doors sealed shut, he carried Odin to the med bay, laying him gently on the scanner bed. "Stay with me, Odin," he murmured, his hands flying over the medical console. "I'm not losing you, not now, not ever." The Shadowhawk shuddered as Joshua slid into the pilot's seat, the sublight engines roaring to life. He punched the thrusters, the inertial dampeners straining as the ship leapt forward. Proximity alarms screamed, sensors painting a grim picture. A flotilla of Federation warships dropped out of hyperspace, their hulls bristling with weaponry. "Attention, Shadowhawk," a cold voice crackled over the comm. "This is Admiral Vax of the GFS Retribution. Stand down and prepare to be boarded." Joshua's lip curled. "Vax, I should have known you'd show up to clean up your mess." He slammed the throttle forward, the Shadowhawk surging towards the blockade. Turbo lasers flashed, the void lit by crisscrossing beams of searing light. Joshua wove through the barrage, his hands dancing across the controls. A lucky shot grazed the Shadowhawk's shields, the deck bucking beneath Joshua's feet. He cursed, rerouting power to the aft deflectors. "Ghost, tell me you've got something," he growled into the comm. The hacker's voice crackled in his ear, tense but focused. "Working on it, boss. That data you snagged, it's big, real big. Coordinates for some kind of secret research station buried in the Kuiper Belt." Joshua's heart pounded. A research station. The key to everything. "Send me the nav data," he barked, "and plot me a course through this damn blockade." The console pinged, a new waypoint blinking on the star map. Joshua grinned, a feral thing of teeth and fury. "Hang on, Odin," he called over his shoulder. "We're not done yet." He wrenched the controls, the Shadowhawk banking hard as it raced towards a gap in the enemy formation. Cannon fire stitched the void, the near misses shaking the ship like a rabid dog. But Joshua flew like a man possessed, his reflexes honed by a lifetime of battle. The Shadowhawk danced and spun, a graceful killer amid the chaos of war. With a final burst of speed, they punched through the blockade, the Federation ships receding behind them. Joshua let out a whoop of triumph, the adrenaline singing in his veins. "Course laid in for the Kuiper Belt," he announced, the starfield blurring as the Shadowhawk accelerated to light speed. "Next stop, Prometheus Station." In the medbay, Odin stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Joshua was at his side in an instant, his hand gripping the Iridian's shoulder. "Easy there, buddy," he said softly. "We made it, we're safe." Odin managed a weak smile, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I never doubted you, my friend, but the true battle, it's only just begun." Joshua nodded, his jaw set with grim determination. "I know, but we'll face it together. You and me against the galaxy." He turned back to the viewport, the endless expanse of space stretching out before them. Somewhere out there, hidden among the stars, lay the answers they sought. The truth behind the Federation's dark machinations. And Joshua would stop at nothing to uncover it. The Shadowhawk hurtled through the void, the Kuiper Belt a glittering band of ice and rock ahead. Joshua's eyes narrowed as he scanned the debris field, searching for any sign of Prometheus Station. Beside him, Odin closed his eyes, his psychic senses reaching out into the cosmos. "There," he said, pointing to a massive asteroid tumbling through the belt. "I can feel it. A nexus of suffering and secrets, buried deep within the rock." Joshua nodded, his hands flying over the controls as he plotted an approach vector. The Shadowhawk dived into the asteroid field, its shields flaring as micrometeorites pinged off the hull. Proximity alarms blared, the sensor board lighting up like a festival grid. "Incoming contacts!" Joshua shouted, wrenching the ship into a barrel roll. "Federation fighters closing fast." Plasma bolts lanced through the void, the enemy ship swooping down like avenging angels. At their head, a sleek black fighter bore down on the Shadowhawk, its guns spitting fire. He slammed the throttle forward, the Shadowhawk leaping to meet its foes. The asteroid field became a swirling maelstrom of rock and metal, ships weaving and dodging in a deadly dance. Joshua flew like a man possessed, his hands a blur on the controls. The Shadowhawk spun and juked, its guns roaring as it blasted enemy fighters to scrap. In the co-pilot's seat, Odin closed his eyes, his mind reaching out to touch the enemy pilots. Illusions bloomed in their minds, asteroids where none existed, clear paths that led to doom. They swerved and collided, their formation falling into chaos. But Zara was relentless, her ship a black dagger that harried the Shadowhawk at every turn. Cannon fire stitched the void, shields flaring and buckling under the onslaught. Joshua gritted his teeth, sweat beading his brow as he pushed the ship to its limits. He jinked and rolled, using the asteroids as cover, luring Zara into the heart of the storm. The two ships dueled amid the whirling rocks, plasma scorching the void. Zara matched Joshua move for move, her skills honed by genetic engineering and ruthless training. But Joshua had something she lacked, the burning fire of righteousness, the unbreakable bond of friendship, and in the end, that made all the difference. With a final desperate maneuver, Joshua slipped behind an enormous asteroid, cutting his engines and letting momentum carry him forward. Zara shot past, her guns blazing at empty space. And in that moment, Joshua struck. The Shadowhawk roared to life, its forward batteries unloading a barrage of quantum torpedoes. Zara's ship vanished in a blinding flash of light, reduced to molten slag in an instant. Joshua sagged back in his chair, his heart pounding. The remaining Federation fighters scattered, unwilling to face the Shadowhawk's wrath alone. "We did it," he breathed, a fierce grin splitting his face. "We beat them." He pointed to the looming bulk of Prometheus Station, its secrets waiting to be unveiled. "In there," the Iridian said, his voice heavy with foreboding. "That's where we'll find the answers we seek, and the horrors we must face." Joshua nodded, his resolve hardening like a diamond under pressure. "Then let's get to it. Time to bring this conspiracy crashing down." The Shadowhawk surged forward, the titanic doors of Prometheus Station yawning open to swallow it whole, and with a final determined breath, Joshua and Odin plunged into the heart of darkness, ready to face whatever nightmares awaited them within. The titanic maw of Prometheus Station yawned before them, a gaping wound in the fabric of space. Joshua's hands flew over the Shadowhawk's controls, weaving through the asteroid field with preternatural skill. Odin sat beside him, eyes closed, his mind reaching out to probe the station's defenses. Joshua nodded grimly, his jaw set. "Then let's introduce ourselves." The Shadowhawk sliced through the void, its matte black hull all but invisible against the starry backdrop. It slipped through the station's sensor grid like a ghost, gliding into a cavernous hangar bay undetected. As the ship touched down, Joshua and Odin emerged, weapons at the ready. The hangar was eerily silent, the air thick with the stench of fear and despair. Suddenly a hidden door hissed open, and a horde of genetically enhanced soldiers poured forth. Their eyes blank, their movements jerky and unnatural. Joshua opened fire, his plasma rifle spitting bolts of searing energy. Odin lashed out with his mind, sending waves of psychic force crashing into the advancing soldiers. They crumpled like marionettes with their strings cut, but more kept coming, an endless tide of twisted flesh and warped minds. Joshua and Odin fought back to back, plasma and psionic energy flashing in a deadly dance. They moved deeper into the station, battling through automated defenses and monstrous experiments gone wrong. And then they saw them. Rows upon rows of containment pods, each housing a living being wired into grotesque machines. Humans, Iridians, dozens of other species, all reduced to components in a vast psychic weapon. Odin's face was a mask of grief and rage. We must end this no matter the cost. They pressed on, fighting through the horrific tableau. Finally they reached the station's central chamber, a cavernous space dominated by a pulsing, malevolent core. And there, waiting for them, was the director. Admiral Zara Vax smiled coldly, her once human features twisted by cybernetic implants and dark psychic energy. "Welcome, Joshua," she purred. "I've been expecting you." Joshua's eyes blazed with fury. How? I saw you die." Zara laughed, a sound like shattering glass. "Did you really think it would be that easy? I've been playing this game longer than you can imagine." She gestured, and a squad of psychic commandos materialized from the shadows, their minds as dark and twisted as her own. "To the Federation, the Resistance, you're all just pawns on my board. With the power of the psychic super soldiers at my command, I will reshape this galaxy in my image. Joshua raised his rifle, his voice deadly calm. Not if we have anything to say about it. And with that, the final battle was joined. Joshua and Odin fought like men possessed, plasma bolts and psychic blasts ripping through the chamber. The commandos fell one by one, but Zara was a force of nature, her psychic powers fueled by a lifetime of rage and ambition. Joshua was battered and bloody, his armor torn, his mind reeling from Zara's psychic assault, but he wouldn't give up. He couldn't. And then Odin was there, his eyes blazing with eldritch light. "Joshua," he said, his voice a whisper in the chaos, "it's the only way." Joshua shook his head, tears stinging his eyes. "No, don't do this." But Odin just smiled sadly. "For the galaxy, for the future, for you." He turned to face the pulsing core, his body wreathed in psychic fire. With a final defiant roar, he unleashed the full might of his power, pouring everything he had into the station's heart. Joshua reached out, trying to pull Odin back, but it was too late. The Iridian looked back at him, a final, peaceful smile on his face. And then the core exploded, a blinding flash of light consuming everything. Joshua was thrown back, his world going white. When he came to, he was in the Shadowhawk's cockpit, the autopilot engaging as the station tore itself apart behind him. Of Odin, there was no sign. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.